And there will be no changes to the agenda. We have one resolution, budget adjustment, Ithaca Tompkins International Airport, ID number 10059. Would someone like to move that? Glenn moves it, Martha seconds. And we have Mike Hall, our airport director, here to explain it all to us. So go, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. If I can take a few minutes to put this in context. You know, what's been happening over the last couple of years, or last 18 months at least, is a lot of change. And go back to a time that's pre-pandemic. I think Leslie's on now, so the airport budget's been pretty constant. It goes up kind of by inflation every year, 3.2, 3.3, $3.5 million. And that's paid for not with local tax dollars, but rather with income that's earned by the airport. And the income is fixed income like rental, and it's variable income in things like charging the airlines every time an airplane lands. So some of it is variable cost transactional, and some of it is fixed. Over the last 7 years, we've built up a savings account, if you will, by executing the budget and having a little bit left over every year. So we had about $1 million in our savings account. Then over the course of the pandemic, in 3 different tranches, we received an additional $5 million federal dollars. So as we look back today, we had, going into the pandemic, we didn't have a commitment for all that money, but in retrospect, the $6 million gets attributed by $1 million to the federal 2020 or for the 2020 budget because of lost income due to the pandemic. So that left us coming into 2021 with a net of $5 million. And that $5 million is money to be applied to income lost by the airport due to the pandemic or to the lower amount of traffic through the airport is the simplest way of describing it. So when we put together the 2021 budget, which is what was approved last fall, a lot of this wasn't known. And we only had 1 tranche of federal money, 2 more were forthcoming. And so we couldn't factor that in, but we knew we were going to have to at some point during the course of the year. And that brings us to the resolution today. When the airlines look at their stake in the airport, there's one number that they really pay attention to, and it's the cost per enplanement. In other words, how much do they pay the airport for every passenger that they put on board? A number that we should be very recognizant of is $13 a passenger. For years, Ithaca has been way high, like up in the 20s. And several years ago, we set out to, to reduce the cost per enplanement. And each year we've worked it down. We got down to, $17 in 19. And then in 2020, it ballooned up to 50 some dollars. That's the impact of the pandemic. Not unique to Ithaca in the sense that when the federal government provided us the 3 tranches of aid to the airport, they did it purposefully to allow the airports to maintain their budget without passing it on to the airlines. And this was part of preserving the air transportation system, if you will. So what we're proposing in this resolution is to use, now the slide said 2.5 million on page 4, but it's really down now to about 2.2 million to apply to the airport budget so that our tenants don't bear the cost of the pandemic. Now, they've been supplemented in other ways. So what we're talking about today is using the airport money that was sent specifically to the airport for this purpose to keep our budget right side up and end the year with a cost per enplanement down near $13, which is where we really need to be going forward to be a competitive airport. It's not easy to understand all this except to think about the fact that we really can't be passing our pandemic impact onto the airlines, particularly when the airlines have been provided their own subsidies and the airport's being provided a subsidy to make up for the lost income that we have. Does that make sense?
I don't know. Does anyone have any questions for Mike?
And this is going to be going. We're not done with this. Where we are right now, we're basing our projections for 2021 at being about 50% of where we started 2020. We started 2020 on track for 120,000 passengers or enplanements. We wound up down someplace near 30,000 after we had several months when the airplanes continued to fly, but there was really nobody on them. This year, we think we're going to be halfway recovered. And as I project seats in market, we go from 100 in the first quarter to 150 in the second quarter to 250 in the third quarter. This Thursday, United Airlines is coming back. That's a big plus. To 400 in the fourth quarter, and 400 is where we need to be. So when you add up our forecasts and the respective impact on income to the airport, that variable income, which is a variable cost to the airlines, we think we'll be in pretty good shape this year, and we'll end the year with $3 million still in the kitty to apply to whatever happens in 22 and beyond. Now, I made a commitment several years ago that I would do everything I could to keep the bonding for the airport development below $10 million. And that is still a possibility. It is still a possibility that some of this money could be used to reduce principal. But the biggest issue we have is recovering ops tempo, because every passenger that comes to the terminal is one more passenger facility charge. And, it helps spread out the cost of the terminal across a broader population of travelers. So we're investing this money. We're requesting to invest this money as it was intended upfront to speed the recovery of the airport. And right now we're ahead of the curve. We're coming back better than anybody in New York, and we're quite optimistic about what lies ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I think Rich has a question.
Yeah, thanks for this, Mike, but I apologize for being confused. There seem to be a lot of different moving parts here. One is there were federal subsidies to the airport, there were federal subsidies to the airlines, and those were to sort of maintain status quo during the pandemic. But now we're talking about the period of time as we recover. And I'm not understanding why changing the fees makes sense if we're doing better than we expected. It sounds like the airlines are coming back and service is going up at the current fees, but we want to reduce them pretty substantially from like $9 to $3. No, I don't know why we're doing this.
Now, this doesn't get shaken out until the end of 2021. And you have to look at the cost of the airport and divide it by 120,000 people. The cost center for the airport, for the airlines, is about 2/3 of the cost of the airport. And, all we're doing, Rich, is not passing on the loss of income that the airport had in the first half of this year to our airline partners. I don't know if I said that better or not, but this is exactly what the federal money was provided for to the airport. We're going to wind up this year with about half as many passengers as we would have in a normal year. If we had a normal start of this, the way we started 2020, when we get back to that level, then we're fine. We don't need to use the federal assistance money to offset the loss of airport income. Did that help? It is complicated. There are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
here.
no, I'm sure I'm just being slow here. Is this a temporary thing that we would lower these fees until we reach stabilization? So this is,
No,
you're saying
no.
will be the new normal.
This is intended to be the new normal. It's intended to be the number, we're intending to have the number of passengers that's necessary to hold that level of cost per enplanement, which is just an index, because this is so complicated. In the end, the airlines take their total charges for Ithaca, divide by the number of passengers they got out of Ithaca, and that's cost per enplanement. We'd worked it down to $17. We want to work it down to 13. This is an opportunity to get to 13, to recover more quickly, and to sustain 13 in the years going forward without outside income.
But it sounds like we're going to reduce our long-term income pretty substantially by doing this.
No, well, look,
Okay.
we don't know what's going to happen in 23 and 24, but we can tell you, I can tell you this: if we don't recover, we're going to be losing air service, and you know, this is, in my opinion, a necessary application of the funds to make sure that we have the seats in market. We know we have enough customers in market so that we are sustainable in years ahead at a level of passengers that holds the CPE at $13. Does that make sense?
I think so. Well, I'm starting to understand what you're saying, but what we're doing is using one-time money to plug a gap. But in the future, it seems like we're not going to have one-time money to help us pay for the revenue that we had been getting. So that causes me to worry, but yeah.
That's true. And there's a lot to worry about, but the biggest worry is that the airlines are going to go elsewhere. You know, they have capital investments they're trying to pay for, and they're going to go to the airports where the cost per enplanement is competitive, and it's not competitive here. It has not been competitive in Ithaca, although we were getting it there. It can very well be competitive going forward, and this is an opportunity to set that future paradigm in place, if you will. And right now is a really good time to do it, because we are ahead of the curve, and we'll get more seats in market if we use the supplement as was intended, to give them a $13 cost per enplanement this year, and then there'll be enough passengers in the market in future years to hold that. Because remember, the fixed costs of the airport and the variable costs of the airport are pretty stable over the years. We're at 3.234 million in our budget.
And I assume the $13 goal we're trying to reach is consistent, say, with Elmira or Binghamton or Syracuse?
Actually higher than each of those airports, but it's a number that the airlines said would make us competitive in their mind. There are a lot of reasons why we can be a little higher and still be competitive. But the biggest one is that a high proportion of our travel out of here involves longer second stages, coast to coast, overseas, what have you, and they make more money on that passenger than they do on somebody who's going to Florida for leisure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Martha?
Go ahead.
The way I understand this, Mike, see if so the money that went to the airlines went to keep their pilots and staff on payroll, so they didn't have to retrain them. If somebody's furloughed for X period of time, they have to completely get retrained when they're brought back. So that was to keep their infrastructure going.
Correct.
The money we got for the airport was to keep our infrastructure going.
That's said much more clearly than I said it. I think that's a very good way of characterizing it. Yeah, there are several parts to the air transportation system, and this money was the part that the federal government thinks that we needed in order to keep our infrastructure competitive as part of the bigger system.
And the way I understand it, so the flights kept coming in during 2020, and they're coming in now, and it costs as much to land a plane with nobody on it as to land a plane that's full, right?
That's correct.
Okay, the way I understand what you've told us over the many, many years on this was that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that the more traffic you have, the more planes the airlines will land here, and the lower their fares, so that if we use this money as a short-term stimulus, that will help the airlines organically sort of lower their cost per person, and then build the traffic that's going to be sustainable. Do I have that right?
You do. And, that's very important because another twist on this whole airport thing is, we're in it for 20 years. If you accept any federal money, you've got to keep the airport going for X amount of years in the future. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that the airport fulfills its mission, which is connecting a centrally isolated community to the world. And, to do that, we need seats in market, and we need people filling those seats. Now, just to give you a quick update, I told you about the projection of seats through the end of the year, that airplanes are leaving here essentially full right now. So we're feeling very good about that recovery, and expect it to continue. We're in a good place right now, but we need to use these months as they were intended, and we'll go forward from there. And this is today. My commitment to F&I was we'll be back to you at least quarterly, or in the event of any major change in the market, to update you. And we're hoping that at the end of the year, when the time comes to actually draw this money, that we don't need to draw as much as we're talking about today. This is really a way of, giving, we're halfway through the year, here's what we think.
So I want to be sure I understand this. We're not actually giving this money to the airlines. What we're doing is reducing the airport's expenses, and that final expense amount gets divided by the number of passengers that enplane, to figure out what the cost per enplanement is. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, that's pretty close. What's happened is we're making up with this federal stimulus money or support money, however you want to look at it. We're making up lost income at the airport
From parking and other things.
for all the above, right? And
Okay.
yeah, so that's but then when it goes in the blender at the end of the year, and we just figured out what the cost for employment was for 2020, because all the bills have to come in, they've all got to be paid, and they go through the calculation. But when you're sitting in the boardroom at United Airlines, there's one slide that comes up, and that's cost per employment at Ithaca. They don't get into all the rest of the stuff
Right.
Condo did. Yeah, so that's a pretty accurate statement. This is really income replacement for the airport. And then, as Martha very correctly pointed out, the airlines got a significant amount of subsidy to their operations. And between the two, the air transportation system comes out of this pandemic whole a lot quicker than it would otherwise.
And the thing that's going to make this sustainable, theoretically, is that as time goes by post-pandemic, we will have increased planes and increased passengers at the airport, and that means increased revenue at the airport, which means we can use less and less of the stimulus money because your income's going to be sufficient to keep those enplanement costs low for all the passengers we're going to have in the future. And this all works as long as the airlines keep sending flights to Ithaca.
Right, and the challenge the airlines have is, they're public corporations, and they have a requirement on behalf of their stockholders to make as much on their capital as they can. So, if they can, the cost per employment you asked about, Myra's down $9 or something like that because they've got a Legion in there.
But who wants to go to Elmira?
Well, and my point is that we have to, we've got something going here that supports a global university. And as long as we're able to keep the passenger count around 120,000 a year or up from there, which is where we started 2020, our cost per employment now will be fine. We've added tremendous capabilities without ballooning the budget here. This budget is a little over half of Elmira's budget, and it's comparable. It's a little less than Binghamton. Both Chemung and Binghamton put $1 million a year of local general fund money into their airports. We don't do that, and we don't intend to do that. We intend to, run the business efficiently and get enough people through the airport that we continue to do what we've done in the past, and that is pay for the airport.
But we don't have any guarantee from the airlines that this strategy is going to work.
No, there's no guarantee. I mean, if you go back, once upon a time it was Mohawk, and then it was Allegheny, and then it was US Air, and then it was Piedmont was in there, and US Airways. Lots of carriers change. What doesn't change is we've got a steady market. We've got a market that has a lot of travelers who travel long distances, and that's profitable for the airlines. So even though they had to pay more, they were kind of willing to be here. They also charge more. So one of the pluses of this is that they can take a little premium off the ticket.
Okay, Martha, you have something else?
Yeah, just that
I see you, Mike. Sorry.
the fares are traffic is so price sensitive. And this is, so in a sense, instead of the local tax, instead of the property tax money going into to support our fares, to support this is federal money. Okay, I guess I just, it seems like the only guarantee is if we don't do this,
We're screwed.
the prices are going to go up. And again, that vicious cycle of higher prices, fewer passengers means fewer planes, means fewer passengers, and you can't get out of it at that point.
Yeah, this is business. This is classic business, thinking and managing, which is different.
Yeah, just one other sentence. When I first got elected in 2001, I asked the person I had defeated, so Joe Lally, what's the main thing I need to worry about? What's the biggest problem on the horizon for the county? He said, the airport. He said, you're going to be faced with subsidizing the airport from property tax money, like by next year. And it's 20 years later, and we haven't had to do that yet. So,
well, we're one step ahead of that. And, I think that I believe we will continue to be one step ahead. I will tell you this, we don't have a whole lot of room left to become more efficient here. We've saved probably $1 million over, well, there's the fund balance, right? It was negative 7 years ago. And, we've incorporated all sorts of technology and concepts in here to hold our budget. And that's what helps us be competitive. So, but there's no way you can cut $1 million out of this budget at this point. It's pretty much what it is, but it's a lot better than $6 million in Elmira and, $4 million in Binghamton. So.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. And you touched on what I was hoping you would. That is the competition that we have with the other airports, and the fact that some of them are subsidized. I think we've got their attention too. And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there's a new billboard on Route 13 by Kirk Road from the Onondaga County Airport soliciting our passengers, saying that they can get one-stop flights from up there. So they know people are flying out of Ithaca. And that, I think, is due to good long-range planning, and not only with our Air Services Board, but with our administration at the airport, and the fact that we're not afraid to try new things up there. So I hope that we can try this recommendation. It's coming from, I know from you, Mike, it's also coming from our former county administrator, because F and I asked them, the two of you, to work on this together. And I think that we need to go ahead with this. And I realize there's no promises in 2023, but we have things in place now that mean that we are going to be the most important airport right down here of the three. And that I think the airlines understand that. That's why we have 3 airlines at this point, and we hope we can keep them.
Well, I think the fact is we don't really have a choice. We have a new expanded airport, and we've got to do everything we can to keep it going. And I don't love my choices here, but we have to do what we have to do in order to support the investment we made. So does anyone else have anything else to say? Are we ready to vote? Mike?
Yes.
Sorry.
Martha, did you have something to say before?
Yeah, I didn't know if we moved it yet, did we?
I thought it was.
Yes, we
Okay.
did.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, Mike's a yes. Martha?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you all very much. Before everybody hops off, Rick Snyder, I have a request for you. For our next regular BCP meeting on the 14th, there have been a lot of questions about, among other things, the fund balance that you reported to HED as being up by over $1 million. If we could get a report from you about how much it's actually up and why you think it's up.
Well, I'm sending one out momentarily. I spoke with Martha a little bit earlier about it, that she asked the same question, and I'm going to be sending that out momentarily and discussing it at the Ledge meeting tonight.
Well, that's terrific. That saves you the trouble of doing it at the next BCP meeting. And then are we close to knowing just how much money, have we closed the books on 2020? Are we close to closing the books on 2020?
Yes, and the numbers that I'm giving are what we consider our final numbers. There's still about 2 or 3 more weeks. We're in the financial statement preparation mode, and things could be adjusted up or down a little bit as the auditors comb through everything that they're looking at. So they're not final numbers, but I feel comfortable enough for discussion purposes that I can release something so that you can get a wherewithal of where we're at generally. And that's why,
Thank you.
that's why I'm putting the report out as early as tonight.
That's terrific news, Rick. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Martha?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I had the number right because I was looking at my HED notes. Rick, thank you very much we got the message last week that you had, I guess it was from Lisa, that you had started the process to bring in the American Rescue Plan money.
Mhm.
The calculation of lost revenue is a critical piece. Do you have enough information to get started on what that is, on how much that is?
We haven't really started yet on that. That we have to address that at a couple different levels and a couple different components, and we haven't gotten a full, complete, satisfaction as to how we're going to set about doing that. There's a lot of moving pieces right now in county admin, and I know that they're relying on us to get the money, which is why we rushed and got things done at the end of last week to get that process through. And but yeah, we'll be reporting back regularly on how that's going with the revenue projections.
Okay, as I know, yeah, getting the money is the first step. So thanks very much. I know that's a complex calculation. Thank you.
Yeah, and as well, I think there were still some questions about exactly how that's supposed to be calculated. Those were among the questions that Jason sent up to NISAC. So stay tuned, but we're making progress, and I thank you all. Does anybody have any objection to adjournment? In that case, we are adjourned. Thank you all.